Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. I've got a pretty special knife to take a look at today. This is the Massdrop Perpetua, and this is a really cool knife for a number of reasons, but this knife is one that has generated quite a bit of discussion. Upon initial release, there were some hiccups and there have been some issues, so I'm going to bring those up in this video and we'll have a discussion about that. And I want to kind of get it out there initially to kind of give you the direction. As we come to various components of the knife, I will at that time address those various challenges that have come along, okay? So I'm not gonna pile on all the things that have been discussed in the forums and stuff about this knife right here. I'll bring those things up naturally as we work our way through. Now, a little bit of background here. This is a knife that's available exclusively through Massdrop. It's designed by TJ Schwartz, who is quite famously the designer behind the Koenig Arius and the CRKT Caligo. Both great knife designs. He's got others as well, but I'm not going to go on and on about it. And finally, this knife is built by Millet Knives. Now, Millet Knives is a small shop, just a few employees, generally speaking, doing higher end stuff. And so their partnership with Massdrop on this larger production knife is rather interesting and a welcome offering for sure. But I think that's part of the reason behind some of those issues that we had upon initial release. So we'll talk about those things as we go along. Let's start with one of the things that's a bit of a challenge for me, and that is the size of this knife. This knife is only 7 5/8 inches long. Generally speaking, my rule is it has to be over 8 inches to make it onto my channel and make it into my collection. But I like the design of this knife so much that I made an exception. And I do find this to be an extremely attractive, extremely useful, and extremely versatile folder. And for those reasons, I sort of, compromised my general size standard a little bit. Although I will say I wish this knife were longer, especially in the blade. It does feel a little imbalanced, especially in hand. So let's go ahead with continuing with our size and weight. So 7 5/8, as I said, only 3 1/8 inches on the blade. It's a hair over that, but 3 1/8 is close enough. 4 7/16, so just under 4.5 inches, and it's just under half an inch thick. So it's a little thicker than 7/16 of an inch, but not much. The weight on this is a little heavy for a small knife. Okay, it's not bad, but 4.3 ounces on this knife, which, for a knife that's under 8 inches is not great, but it's certainly not heavy enough to complain about. This is not really a knife you notice in your pocket or makes you think, oh man, if I fell in a lake, I'm going to sink to the bottom. No, not at all. The weight is fine. It's just a little heavy for its size. Let's put it that way. Okay, so 4.3 ounces. And again, when it comes to size, weight, and carry, my only issue is I'm carrying something that's substantial in size. Certainly this handle fits into what I would call the medium size range of folders, but the blade is pretty small for what you're getting. Okay, so that's my only issue with size, weight, and carry. Let's focus a little bit more on that blade. It is Nitro V steel, which is a nitrogen-rich steel. And what they're trying to do with these steels is replace the carbon content with nitrogen content and still achieve a high level of hardness, a high level of edge retention, while making a blade that is very, very corrosion resistant, very, very stainless, okay? So generally, so this knife does that, as well as a number of other cool nitrogen-based steels. And I really think that it's attractive to me to be able to get a steel like this at a very budget price point. I think that's really, really cool. In terms of other factors that are important, this is a beautiful stonewash finish, really, really nicely done. We've got it fairly thin behind the edge, 26 thousandths behind the edge with this hollow grind, and 125 thousandths in the blade stock. So we've got a blade here that and this is something I talk about a lot, is pretty balanced. It slices well, it cuts well with that nice thin edge, but it's thick enough, it's robust enough that it also inspires a lot of confidence. So I really, really like all of that. There is one issue to bring up here, and that is when this knife was initially released, they projected, when they started sharing the specs online, they said the blade would be hardened to 58-59 Rockwell. A lot of people complained about that. A lot of people felt like it was too soft. And I will say, for the community that you're marketing this to, okay, the reality is not many people on the street are going to Massdrop to buy their folding knives. Not many people on the street have ever even heard of TJ Schwartz or Millet knives. These features, okay, and this knife in its design and its, all the things that are important about it, this is a knife geared toward the knife community. And those people want to see a good high Rockwell number, right? And so this knife in production, now that it's released, they changed that number to 61 Rockwell. So that's what the blade hardness, that's what the hardness is on this Nitro V steel. And TJ Schwartz has gone on Blades forums and made some comments about this, that they found really, really good performance at that hardness. So that's really nice to see in case you were, looking at those initial specs and kind of feeling the same way that many people did. Why is it only 58, 59 Rockwell? Well, it's not, it's 61. Okay, so there you go. That's the blade. Other than being too short, it is really, really good. Let's go on and talk about lockup and deployment. This is a lock most of us are familiar with, especially if we've been around the knife industry for a little while. This is, of course, an Axis lock. Now, we can't call it that because Benchmade owns the name Axis lock. However, the patent on the mechanism is expired. So anyone who wants to can make a knife with this lock and be completely free and clear legally. And so a number of people have. Now, I know this is immediately going to bring up discussions about, Kevin, you gave Gonzo a hard time and you've given others a hard time about copying designs. Well, that's a bit different than copying a locking mechanism, okay? So every flashlight is going to have an on-off switch. But every flashlight should not copy somebody else's design, okay? And this is not copying a design. It looks a little Griptilian-esque, but I think it's original enough that it doesn't put me in mind of any Benchmades for sure, other than that lock, okay? So it does have some of the same problems as other Benchmade Axis lock knives, okay? And so here's where I'm gonna share with you some of the problems. A lot of the complaints that initially came out were related to the lockup, the pivot, the Omega springs, all of that stuff. So we've had stories of centering issues, okay? So this one is very nicely centered, but we've also had stories of gritty action, of broken Omega springs, missing Omega springs, and those things are slowly being worked out. I've followed along with a number of people who had those issues, and it seems like in all the cases I was able to keep up with that everything has been taken care of. Either Millet sent them out new Omega springs, or they were able to take the knife apart, clean it up a bit and get it functioning right, or even just clean it out with some forced air and put a couple of drops of oil in that pivot and everything was fine. So with some minor adjustments and a little bit of help from customer service, it seems as if most of the sort of action related issues have been taken care of, all right? And so I'm really, really happy to see that. And I'm really happy to see both Sean at Millet Knives and TJ Schwartz standing behind this. Millet Knives has had some hiccups in the past. Whenever they go into large production numbers, they seem to struggle a little bit. And I mean, that makes sense for a small shop. So I don't think it's, anything to be too worried about. Now, I do want to make a brief comment on just the amount of sort of discussion that went on with this knife. And I think it's a direct result of who it was marketed to. All right, so if you look at who's buying, Benchmade 940s or Griptilians or, cold steels or any number of knives, you're going to find that, yeah, the knife community buys some of those, but the vast majority are purchased by non-knife people that just went into the store looking for a folding knife. All right, those people are not on our radar screen. We don't follow them on Instagram. They're not involved in blade forums. We don't, you don't see the end result of end users having various issues. Okay, this knife was marketed and bought almost 100% by the knife community. And that means the people who get them, we have associations. You're going to see them on blade forums. You're going to have them on Instagram or other knife groups that you're a part of. And so you're going to see every single issue, right? It's sort of like the crime statistics these days. I think everyone knows this mentally, but there's often the perception out there that the world is more and more and more dangerous, when in fact, crime, violent crime, murder, firearms death, all of those statistics have been dropping steadily for years and continue to do so. The difference is we now hear about every single one. So our perception is that there's more, even though the facts are not in keeping with that. Okay, and so TJ Schwartz made the comment that it's about 1% of these knives. So out of 1,000 knives, that's 100. That still sucks, okay? But about 1% that had some kind of an issue. And the difference is, it's just that we hear about all of those issues, and so there's a little more discussion about that. Now, in terms of my action, it's pretty easy to actuate. You can see it's it'll drop shut. It will, flick open nicely, although I'm not going to be able to do it nicely on camera maybe. There you go. So yeah, I don't have any problem with this knife. I have taken mine apart and, oiled it and cleaned everything up, and I did see a slight improvement, although it wasn't crazy, but I did get a little bit of an improvement. But let me warn you, if you're thinking of taking yours apart, it is not for the faint of heart. Benchmade knives, axis lock knives in general, are not easy to disassemble, so just take care, okay? Just gonna give you that warning. If you're mechanically inclined and you're really handy, you should be fine. If you can change your brakes on your car, you should be able to take this knife apart and put it together. But if you never touch anything mechanical, just leave it alone, okay? Find other ways to fix it up. All right, so the one complaint I do have is this. Notice how close the thumb stud is to the handle. At the very least, they could have milled this out. They could have done something, because this thumb stud is a little difficult to access. What I've noticed, what I've learned over use, is that if you come up the handle like this with your thumb, you're gonna usually get it. But even then, I still struggle a little bit, especially if I use my thumb on the flat. I just can't get a hold of it. Okay, so that is one complaint that I do have, and one that should have been addressed, because way back when these were in pre-production, they sent one to Austin, Epic Snuggle Bunny, and he said in his video, look, I told them the thumb stud was glued too close to the handle, and it is, and they didn't fix it. So that, I will say, is a more or a more significant complaint, because they knew about it and they should have done something about it. All right, so having that out of the way, the action on mine is quite good, and it seems like others who had problems with their action, they're okay now. All right, now moving on to the handle construction and ergonomics. This is one of my favorite parts of the knife, along with the blade design. Okay, not the blade size, but the blade design. The handle construction is fantastic. It's nice, thick stainless steel liners. It's standoffs. They're milled out to save a little bit of weight. We've got G10 here. This is a really, really strongly built knife, and it feels really good in hand. Now, the one thing, I've got to bring it up again, guys, is this is a robust, heavy-duty feeling handle. When you get it in hand, it feels strong, it feels confident. There's no play, there's no movement. You feel like I could do just about anything. And then you look at the little blade that you have sticking out of your hand, and you're like, this blade does not match this handle, okay? And it becomes even more noticeable in hand. It really does. So I hate to harp on this, but it is something that just really throws me off every time I pick up the knife. Finally, the pocket clip definitely needs some work. It seems as if they didn't harden it. Okay, that is my contention. It is just too soft and too pliable. It's not springy. Okay, this is how a pocket clip should be. It's springy. I actually have to put quite a bit of force there. This one it's just too soft. I'm moving that easily with just a fingernail under it. Okay, so there have been reports of them bending and twisting and all kinds of stuff, and this one did catch on a piece of furniture on me and bent pretty badly. I was able to bend it back, and you would never know it, but it did happen. So that is definitely a miss, okay? And on future versions, and I suspect we'll see a bunch of different colors and probably some different blade finishes, they really need to address the issue with these pocket clips. They are poorly done. All right, so what's next on the agenda? Well, is it comfortable in hand? And that it absolutely is. And that's where, in use, this is a great knife. It cuts well, it's confidence inspiring. It's really, a knife that is meant to be used. And so if you want something that is well put together, that's comfortable in hand, that really feels like you can get some work done, this is a really, really good option. So having gotten all of those things out of the way, so I love the construction, I love the ergonomics, I love the blade design, I just wish it was bigger. The pocket clip kind of sucks, and the thumb stud placement kind of sucks. So those are the two things that I have sort of more substantial issues with. Now, let's go ahead and do some comparisons, because there are some comparisons that are worth considering. If you want a heavily built, really comfortable, really well designed EDC knife, you know, the Massdrop Crux is a great option. This is another very confidence inspiring knife that I really do enjoy. So I think it's worth looking at, and the price point is not that different. Another knife that again fits into a similar vein, and by a similar vein I mean a knife that's really well constructed, really confidence inspiring, really well put together, and can do an awful lot, the American Lawman. Now, the American Lawman is going to have steel that's just as good or better. Well, CTS XHP is great steel. These will at some point be switching to S35 VN, which I kind of hate. I mean, I don't hate that steel, but I wish they'd stuck with CTS XHP. Anyway, the American Lawman definitely has to be considered alongside of this. It's about the same weight. It's thinner. The blade is going to be, you know, equally useful, equally well designed. Okay, similar ergonomics. Now, I really like having that finger choil to choke up. So that is a very close competitor. And I may even do a full discussion comparing those two, because they are really similar to me. And if you're looking at a Perpetua, you may want to look at an American Lawman. The Bird Raven, CTS BD1 steel. Again, I'm comparing this because it's a smaller, heavy duty built knife. So, you know, this is a smaller knife, a little shorter blade length, but really well built, really confidence inspiring. Okay, so if you want, you know, a small-ish heavy user knife, there's another good example. I've got two more to go. One is, of course, the Para 2. Perhaps we could put the Para 3 in here, but I just can't. I don't like anything about the Para 3. I feel like, you know, it's just, anyway. That's a discussion for a different day. The knife that doesn't need to exist, the Para 3. But here is a Para 2. Great knife, great ergonomics, a little thinner blade stock. So if you like something that's just a little longer, a little thinner, you may enjoy the Para 2. Now, in fact, I shouldn't say that. The cutting edge, the edge geometry is very close to the same. I think the Para measure is just a little bit thicker, okay? But it is a finer blade overall, a little bit thinner behind the edge, or I mean a little bit thinner out to the tip. And then finally, let's pull in the Buck Marksman. Now, this is, of course, the S35 VN G10 Marksman. Actually similar in price point to this knife. Again, a very high-performing, well-versed, EDC-capable knife. Even in the standard version with 154 cm and aluminum, it's still a pretty nice knife and competes pretty well against the Perpetua. So there you go, guys. So those are some of the comparisons that I have for you. Now, what are my final concluding remarks on this knife? Is it a good knife? Is it a bad knife? Should be lining up to buy one? It is definitely a cool knife, all right? It's highly useful. It's sort of a small and mighty knife, and that's why I brought in the comparisons that I did. Overall, you know, given the fact there are some hiccups, the blade length, the thumb stud, and the pocket clip, those things I'm not in love with. But overall, I really enjoy this knife. I find it to be very useful, comfortable to carry, a good cutting tool, and it has some extra little cool things, such as, you know, being designed by TJ Schwartz, offering a really cool steel at a price that most of us can kind of deal with. And if you're, you know, if the thing that puts you off of Massdrop is the fact that they're made overseas, or many of their offerings are made overseas, this is made in the US. And finally, it comes in at a very good price point. As I said, 110 or 120 bucks is quite reasonable for what you're getting here. So there you go, guys. That's my overall take on this knife. I do enjoy it. I love the design. I get a lot of use and joy out of this knife, but there are some issues that do arise. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.